We asked 4 kids what they thought about Donald Trump, and their answers were raw, honest, and surprisingly emotional. What they shared left us speechless, and it might leave you the same. Have you ever wondered how children, with their unfiltered and often surprising perspective, interpret the world around them? They observe things differently, seeing through a lens that's unclouded by years of biases, opinions, and experiences. When we sat down with these kids, we expected simple, even humorous responses. What we got instead was something we didn't see coming. Before we dive into what they shared, a big thank you to all of you watching. It means so much to us that you're here, and if you're enjoying content like this, we'd love for you to join our growing community. Let us know where you're tuning in from in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Your support keeps us going and helps us bring stories like this to life. Now, let me take you back to the room where this conversation unfolded. 4 children, each from different backgrounds, sat together with nothing but their raw thoughts and candid feelings. The room was quiet except for the occasional shuffle of small feet on the floor. At first, the questions seemed simple. What do you think of Donald Trump? What do you know about him? Their initial reactions were what you'd expect from kids, funny, a little playful, maybe even uncertain. But as they warmed up, their words began to take a different tone, something that made the air feel heavier in the best way possible. One child, barely 9 years old, spoke with such clarity that it felt as though we were listening to someone much older. My mom says he makes a lot of rules, she began, her voice steady. Sometimes they help people, but sometimes my dad gets really sad about them. He says it's hard to explain why. She glanced around nervously, as though unsure if she'd said too much, and then added softly, I don't like it when my dad is sad. Another boy, just 7, was quieter at first. He fidgeted with his shoelaces, looking anywhere but at the camera. When he finally spoke, his words were like a pebble thrown into still water, small but rippling. My grandma doesn't like him, he said matter-of-factly. She watches TV and shakes her head a lot. But she says it's because she remembers things that happened before I was born. I don't really get it, but I think it makes her scared. And then there was the oldest, a 12-year-old with an intensity in her eyes that was hard to ignore. She leaned forward as she talked, her voice firm. I think he's just a man. Like, he can do good things and bad things, like anyone. But my teacher says that being president is the biggest job in the world, so I guess his good and bad things are bigger. She paused for a moment, choosing her words carefully. I wish he'd remember what it's like to be a kid, though. Like, how it feels when grown-ups make all the choices and you just have to live with them. Each answer was a reminder that kids see more than we often give them credit for. Their words carried an innocence that made them hit harder than any speech or debate ever could. It wasn't just their opinions that struck us, it was the way they reflected the emotions of the adults around them, mirroring fears, hopes, and frustrations in ways that felt deeply human. As we listened, it became clear that this wasn't just a conversation about politics. It was about how the actions of leaders ripple through homes, classrooms, and dinner tables, how decisions made in places most kids will never see can still shape their tiny worlds. Stay with us, because this story is just getting started. What these kids revealed about their hopes and fears isn't something you'll want to miss. Their voices might be small, but their words carry weight. Kids have a way of seeing the world differently, simpler, purer, and, at times, with a wisdom that stops you in your tracks. When we hear the word president, we think of power, responsibility, and headlines. But when kids hear that word, they think of something entirely different. Their thoughts bridge the gap between innocence and reality, reminding us how deeply the actions of one individual can ripple into every corner of society. So, let me take you back to that room, those 4 children, each with their own story to tell, each reflecting the world they've come to understand. As they spoke, their words began to paint a picture far beyond their years. It wasn't polished or rehearsed, but it was authentic in a way that makes you lean in, even if you weren't expecting to. One of the younger boys, the quietest in the group, surprised us all with his simple, heartfelt question, why can't grown-ups just talk to each other instead of shouting? He wasn't asking for much, just a basic conversation. You could see the earnest confusion in his face, the kind that makes you pause and wonder when, as adults, we stopped believing in solutions that felt within reach. The girl who had spoken earlier about decisions being bigger when you're a president listened intently. She didn't jump in right away, but when she finally spoke, her words carried a weight that made us all sit still. I think, she began slowly, that when people get really powerful, they forget what it's like to be scared of losing things. Like, they think their choices don't hurt as much because they're far away. But we're all still people, right? We still feel it. Her words weren't just her own, they echoed something you could sense in the room, an unspoken truth about how deeply connected we all are, even when we forget to show it. It made me wonder, how often do we, as adults, brush past the feelings of others, assuming they're fine because they don't say otherwise? But it wasn't all heavy. There was laughter, too. One boy made a joke about presidents needing timeouts like kids do. Maybe if they sat in the corner for a while, they'd have to think about what they did, he said with a grin, and it broke the tension in the room. The others laughed, nodding in agreement, and for a moment, it felt like everything could be that simple again. As the session went on, their perspectives began to shift from talking about one person to something bigger, something universal. It's not just about him, the eldest said at one point. It's about what we all do when we think we're too important to listen. Her words hung in the air. It wasn't accusatory, just reflective, as if she were thinking out loud and inviting us to think with her. And in that moment, I realized that what these kids were saying wasn't just about politics. It was about us. It was about the choices we make every day, the words we use, the kindness we show or don't, and the way those things ripple out into the lives of people around us. Now, let me ask you, when was the last time you really listened to someone younger than you? Not just heard them, but really let their words sink in? Sometimes, the most surprising wisdom comes from the most unexpected places. As we wrap up, I want to know, what do you think? What would your kids say if you asked them the same question? Or, if you don't have kids, what would your younger self have said? Leave a comment below. I'm curious to hear your thoughts because this isn't just their story, it's ours, too. As the conversation with the kids continued, a lighter moment surfaced when one of them, a 7-year-old boy with curly hair and an infectious grin, asked, "Do presidents get pizza Fridays too? Or do they just have to eat fancy food all the time?" The room burst into laughter, and even the adults behind the cameras couldn't help but smile. It was a small, innocent question, but it broke the tension and reminded everyone how kids often find humor in the most unexpected places. The oldest of the group, the 12-year-old girl, smirked and responded thoughtfully, "I bet they can eat whatever they want, but I think they're probably too busy to enjoy it." Then she paused, as if something had just occurred to her. Actually, do you think they ever wish they could have a normal day, like us? No cameras, no meetings, no pressure? It was a question that hung in the air for a moment, one that didn't really have an answer but made everyone stop and think. How often do we consider what it means to live under constant scrutiny, where every decision is watched, debated, and judged? Another boy, fidgeting with the sleeves of his sweater, chimed in with a surprising observation. "My mom says being a leader is really lonely. Like, even when you have people around you, you can still feel like you're by yourself." He shrugged, then added, "I don't think I'd like that. I'd want someone to eat pizza with." The honesty of his statement caught everyone off guard. It wasn't about policies or politics, it was about something much simpler, connection. In his own way, he had tapped into a feeling many adults struggle to articulate. What struck me most about this group of kids was their ability to take something as complex as leadership and reduce it to its core: responsibility, humanity, and relationships. They didn't have all the answers, but they asked the kind of questions that make you want to be better, that make you reflect on the choices you make every day. At one point, the youngest of the group, a 6-year-old girl with a voice barely above a whisper, asked something that stopped everyone in their tracks. "Do you think presidents ever get scared? Like, scared they might make a mistake?" The room went quiet. For a moment, it felt like no one knew how to respond. But then the 12-year-old, who had been quietly watching the others, spoke up again. "I think they do. I think they just don't say it out loud. Maybe they feel like they can't, because everyone expects them to be strong." It was a moment of pure empathy, the kind that catches you off guard and stays with you. Kids have a way of seeing past the surface, of understanding things in a way that's both simple and profound. They remind us that strength isn't about never being scared, it's about choosing to keep going even when you are. As the session came to an end, the kids were asked one final question: if you could say one thing to the president, what would it be? Their answers ranged from funny to heartfelt. Take a break and have some ice cream, one boy shouted, earning a round of giggles from the others. But it was the youngest, the girl with the soft voice, who left us with a final thought that none of us will forget. I'd tell them to remember how it feels to be small, she said. Because when you're small, you notice the things that big people miss. And with that, the conversation ended, leaving us all with more questions than answers, but maybe that's the point. Now, it's your turn. What would you say if you had the chance to speak to a leader? Or better yet, what would your younger self say? Let us know in the comments below, because sometimes, the most important voices are the ones we don't hear often enough. As the conversation with the kids continued, a lighter moment surfaced when one of them, a 7-year-old boy with curly hair and an infectious grin, asked, "Do presidents get pizza Fridays too? Or do they just have to eat fancy food all the time?" The room burst into laughter, and even the adults behind the cameras couldn't help but smile. It was a small, innocent question, but it broke the tension and reminded everyone how kids often find humor in the most unexpected places. The oldest of the group, the 12-year-old girl, smirked and responded thoughtfully, "I bet they can eat whatever they want, but I think they're probably too busy to enjoy it." Then she paused, as if something had just occurred to her. Actually, do you think they ever wish they could have a normal day, like us? No cameras, no meetings, no pressure? It was a question that hung in the air for a moment, one that didn't really have an answer but made everyone stop and think. How often do we consider what it means to live under constant scrutiny, where every decision is watched, debated, and judged? Another boy, fidgeting with the sleeves of his sweater, chimed in with a surprising observation. "My mom says being a leader is really lonely. Like, even when you have people around you, you can still feel like you're by yourself." He shrugged, then added, "I don't think I'd like that. I'd want someone to eat pizza with." The honesty of his statement caught everyone off guard. It wasn't about policies or politics, it was about something much simpler: connection. In his own way, he had tapped into a feeling many adults struggle to articulate. What struck me most about this group of kids was their ability to take something as complex as leadership and reduce it to its core: responsibility, humanity, and relationships. They didn't have all the answers, but they asked the kind of questions that make you want to be better, that make you reflect on the choices you make every day. At one point, the youngest of the group, a 6-year-old girl with a voice barely above a whisper, asked something that stopped everyone in their tracks. "Do you think presidents ever get scared? Like, scared they might make a mistake?" The room went quiet. For a moment, it felt like no one knew how to respond. But then the 12-year-old, who had been quietly watching the others, spoke up again. "I think they do. I think they just don't say it out loud. Maybe they feel like they can't, because everyone expects them to be strong." It was a moment of pure empathy, the kind that catches you off guard and stays with you. Kids have a way of seeing past the surface, of understanding things in a way that's both simple and profound. They remind us that strength isn't about never being scared, it's about choosing to keep going even when you are. As the session came to an end, the kids were asked one final question: if you could say one thing to the president, what would it be? Their answers ranged from funny to heartfelt. "Take a break and have some ice cream," one boy shouted, earning a round of giggles from the others. But it was the youngest, the girl with the soft voice, who left us with a final thought that none of us will forget. "I'd tell them to remember how it feels to be small," she said. "Because when you're small, you notice the things that big people miss." And with that, the conversation ended, leaving us all with more questions than answers, but maybe that's the point. Now, it's your turn. What would you say if you had the chance to speak to a leader? Or better yet, what would your younger self say? The camera pans to Ella, sitting cross-legged on a colorful beanbag, her blonde curls bouncing as she leans forward, her eyes full of curiosity. She starts with a question that's equal parts funny and genuine. Why does Trump have so much hair? Like, does he use special shampoo or something? And can presidents eat ice cream every day? Her innocence immediately draws a smile from everyone in the room. Ella doesn't know much about politics, but she knows what makes her laugh, and questions like these are just her way of making sense of the world. She pauses for a moment, then tilts her head thoughtfully. Do you think he works as hard as my dad? She asks, her tone shifting to something a little more serious. My dad's always fixing things around the house, answering calls, and doing stuff for his boss. He's always busy. Is Trump like that, too? Ella's words feel relatable, even universal. It's the kind of observation only a child would make, but it hits home for anyone who's ever watched a parent juggle the demands of work and family. Her expression softens as she continues. Sometimes my dad gets so busy, he forgets to play with me. Like, he doesn't mean to, but I know he's tired. Do you think Trump forgets to play with his family, too? Or maybe he's too busy making rules to even think about it? The room goes quiet for a moment, her vulnerability cutting through the laughter from earlier. Ella isn't just talking about a president, she's talking about connection, about the little moments that mean the most to her. She looks down at her hands, fiddling with a loose thread on her sweater, before glancing back up with a small smile. If I were president, she says, her voice firm despite her age, I'd make sure to spend 10 minutes a day playing with my family. Just 10 minutes. It doesn't sound like much, but it would make everyone happy. Her final thought lands with a quiet sort of power, leaving everyone in the room reflecting on their own lives. It's not just a lesson about leadership, it's about priorities, about the things we sometimes overlook in the rush of daily life. Ella shifts back into her beanbag, her curiosity and humor shining through once more. Oh, and I definitely eat ice cream every day. Maybe presidents should do that, too. Her segment ends with laughter, but her words linger, setting the tone for what's to come. As we move on to meet the next child, Ella's heartfelt insights remind us all of the importance of making time for the people we love even when life feels too busy. Jaden sits in the middle of the group, his face calm but focused, as if he's carefully considering every word before he speaks. I think Trump likes being the boss, he says, his tone straightforward. But being the boss must be so lonely sometimes. The other kids glance at him, waiting for him to explain. Jaden doesn't rush. He's not the type to speak just to fill the silence. Being president, he continues, is probably like being in charge of a really big classroom. You have to make sure everyone follows the rules, but you also want them to be happy. And that's hard because not everyone likes the same things. His words come out slowly, but they don't feel heavy. Instead, they carry a weight of understanding that feels older than his years. Like in my class, he says, some kids want more time to play, and others want to do more projects. No matter what the teacher does, someone's upset. I think being a president is like that, but way, way bigger. Jaden looks thoughtful for a moment, then shares something more personal. Once, I tried to be the best kid in my class. I thought if I worked really hard, helped the teacher, and did everything right, people would like me more. But instead, it just felt lonely. Like nobody understood why I was trying so hard. I wonder if Trump feels like that, too. Like maybe he's doing what he thinks is best, but people don't get it. The room is quiet as Jaden continues, his voice steady. If I were president, I'd do things differently. I'd try asking more questions, like, what do you need, or what would make things better for you? I think if you really listen to people, they'll feel like they matter. That's how you make things better, by understanding what people need, not just telling them what to do. Jaden sits back, his expression still thoughtful, but there's a small, quiet confidence in his words. His reflections aren't just about being in charge, they're about understanding, connection, and the kind of kindness that can make even the hardest decisions feel a little less lonely. As his voice trails off, there's a sense that Jaden's view of the world is one we could all learn from. Mia sits quietly, her small hands resting on her lap as she tilts her head, her voice soft and filled with genuine curiosity. Do you think the president has time to hug people? She asks, her wide eyes full of wonder. It's not a question meant to challenge or criticize, it's simply the kind of innocent thought that only a child would dare to voice. She hesitates for a moment, as though picturing the president somewhere far away, and then continues, her words steady and thoughtful. My grandma always says kindness is the most powerful thing, Mia shares. She says it can make someone happy, even if they're having the worst day. She looks down briefly, brushing her fingers over her dress, before glancing back up, her expression curious but serious. Do you think Trump tries to be kind to people? Or is he too busy doing important stuff? Her words carry a quiet sincerity, the kind that doesn't ask for answers but invites reflection. She shifts in her seat slightly, then smiles as a thought seems to land in her mind. I hope he has someone to hug him when he's sad, she says softly. Even really strong people need hugs, right? She looks around, as if searching for reassurance, before adding, hugs make me feel safe. My grandma says hugs are like saying, it's okay. I'm here for you. Her voice trembles ever so slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer honesty of what she's sharing. Mia's not just imagining what the president might need, she's expressing what comforts her, what she knows in her heart can make a difference to anyone, no matter who they are. If I were president, she continues, her tone firmer now, I'd hug everyone who feels sad. Because maybe that's all some people need to feel better. There's no grand explanation or long-winded speech, just a simple truth from a 6-year-old who believes the world might be a little better if people just felt more cared for. Her words linger, not because they're complicated, but because they remind us of something we often overlook. It's not the big gestures that stay with us, it's the small, human acts of kindness that make us feel less alone. Mia's soft-spoken wisdom feels like a gentle nudge, asking us to consider, when was the last time we made someone feel safe, cared for, or seen? It's not a question she answers herself, but it's one that lingers, asking us to reflect long after her story is told. Ethan bounces in his chair, his energy lighting up the room. With a grin that stretches ear to ear, he exclaims, if I were president, I'd make every Friday pizza day. The excitement in his voice is infectious, and for a moment, you can almost see his dream of a world united by cheesy slices and shared laughter. He pauses briefly, as if letting the idea settle before diving into something more thoughtful. But being president isn't just about pizza, he says, his tone shifting slightly. It's probably like when you want everyone to play the same game, but they can't stop arguing about the rules. You try to make everyone happy, but no matter what you do, someone's upset. Ethan's enthusiasm softens as he reflects on his own experience. One time at school, he begins, I tried to organize a soccer game at recess. Everyone wanted to play, but nobody wanted to agree on the rules. Some kids wanted no goalkeepers, others wanted to change the teams, and it felt like no one was listening. It got so frustrating that we ended up not playing at all. I think that's what being president is like, trying really hard to make things work but feeling stuck because people can't agree. His voice grows quieter, more serious, as he looks down for a moment, remembering how it felt to try so hard and still fall short. But Ethan isn't one to dwell on the negative for long. His eyes light up again as he shares an idea that could only come from a kid's boundless imagination. If I were president, he says, I'd make sure everyone gets to pick a fun rule. Like Pizza Fridays or Pajama Mondays. That way, people get to feel like they're part of something fun, and maybe it'll be easier to agree on the bigger stuff. Ethan's face lights up as he finishes, his excitement as vibrant as when he started. His idea might sound playful, but beneath the humor lies a message about inclusion and compromise, about finding small ways to bring people together even when the bigger things feel too hard. His story isn't just about pizza or soccer, it's about how leadership, at its best, can make space for everyone to feel heard and valued. Ethan's perspective reminds us that sometimes the simplest ideas, like Pizza Fridays, can carry the biggest lessons about what it means to lead with heart and imagination. From Ella's simple wish for family time, to Jaden's thoughtful take on leadership, Mia's quiet focus on kindness, and Ethan's playful yet creative ideas, these kids remind us of what really matters. Their honesty, wisdom, and humor show us that sometimes, the answers to life's biggest questions are simpler than we think. They're about connection, understanding, and remembering the things that make us human. So, which of these kids' thoughts stood out to you the most? Was it Ella's wish for a few minutes of quality time, Jaden's reflections on how hard it is to make everyone happy, Mia's belief in the power of a hug, or Ethan's idea that fun can bring people together? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts and how you see the world through their words. And if Ella made you laugh, Jaden made you think, Mia brought a tear to your eye, or Ethan made you smile, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Your support helps us share more heartwarming stories like this, and we'd love for you to be part of this journey with us. Next time, we're asking kids about something even bigger. Can you guess what it is? Drop your ideas in the comments. We can't wait to hear your guesses and see where this conversation goes next. Until then, Thank you for watching and for letting these kids' voices brighten your day.